For the first time in my life, I feel like I understand what it means to be human.
You gave words to things I've always felt, but never knew how to say.
Myth isn't a lie, it's a doorway, and now I've stepped through it.
The Spiritual Shitshow Podcast with Suzanne Sole, episode number 25.
Hey, you gorgeous fucking treasures, and welcome to the Spiritual Shitshow Podcast, where we get into the total fuckfest the healing and spiritual awakening journey can be. I'm your host, Suzanne Sole, comedian, lifelong spiritual student, and I say at the beginning of every episode of my podcast that I'm sharing the delicious nuggets, the tasty treats, the precious gems, and all the other shit I've learned along my spiritual and healing journey that has helped me and that I hope helps you too. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about the power of myth because it was so incredibly fucking transformative for me. And so I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to tell you how it affected me. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so one day, how many moons ago is 20 years? Anyways. One day in the early 2000s, while I was living in Los Angeles as a struggling actress, which you know the famous line when you're a struggling actress in Los Angeles. Oh, you're an actress? Which restaurant? Anyways, I was at home because I had the day off from the restaurant where I worked, and I had the TV on while I was cleaning my house, which, let's face it, was a studio apartment because auditioning for television series and lunch meat commercials takes a lot of your time up without a lot of monetary compensation. So anyways, I was cleaning my very cozy studio apartment and I had the TV on. And I don't know about you, but for me, there's something very nostalgic about having the TV on while you're cleaning the house. Maybe because having the TV on while I'm cleaning always reminds me of when I was a kid. Probably because my mother was cleaning and I had the TV on. And now, unfortunately, I have to clean my own damn mess, which totally sucks. And I'm wondering when they're going to do something useful with AI and make self-cleaning homes, or at least a cleaning robot, so I can go back to having the TV on while someone else is cleaning my house and not me. Anyways, I digress, and I admit that was quite a tangent. But like I said, I was cleaning my apartment and I had the channel on PBS, which stands for Public Broadcasting Service, aka public television, which BTW is one of the most important networks in the US. Just saying. And on that day in the early 2000s, PBS was airing the 6-part series, The Power of Myth, which I had never seen. It's a series in which journalist Bill Moyers sits down for 6 different conversations with the legendary author and mythologist Joseph Campbell, who at the time I had never heard of. And so I was just cleaning away, listening to the program in the background, just dusting and polishing like you do. And as I was listening, as I dusted and polished and cleaned away, the conversation started catching me, and I found myself starting to tune in and listen more intently. And then I heard Joseph Campbell say, "Now we want to think about God. God is a thought. God is a name. God is an idea, but its reference is to something that transcends all thinking. The ultimate mystery of being is beyond all categories of thought." And then I stopped in my tracks and I turned to look at the television to see this lovely grandfather-like character with a twinkle in his eye and a gleeful lilt in his voice, sitting in his tweed jacket talking to Bill Moyers, saying, "My friend Heinrich Zimmer of years ago," who BTW was a German linguist and studier of indigenous people, used to say, "The best things can't be told." Campbell went on to say, because the best things transcend thought. The second best are misunderstood because those are the thoughts that are supposed to refer to that which can't be thought about, and one gets stuck with the thoughts. The third best are what we talk about. And myth is that field of reference, metaphors referring to what is absolutely transcendent. At this point, my mouth was hanging open and my eyeballs were like 2 giant eyeballs. I had never heard anything like this, and yet I understood it deep within me. I knew I was hearing truth. What I had just heard this man say had never been verbalized to me, and his words were answering questions I didn't even realize I had. Questions I didn't even realize had been lingering within me all the while, waiting to be answered until that moment. And it was in that moment that I understood the power of myth. With my mouth agape, I've always wanted to use that word, I stopped everything, leaving my desk half dusted and the mirrors smudged, and sat down on the couch and watched Joseph Campbell gleefully share the insights, myths, and revelations that could help us understand our entire human experience. He explained how ancient stories hold keys to our deepest questions, including why we're here and what it means to be alive, connecting the dots of the cosmos like a playful forest nymph. And I was never the same. Now, if you've never heard of the power of myth, buckle up, buttercup. So, before we all started going on social media and talking about our deepest human stuff, present company included, and creating posts quoting Rumi with paisley and pastel fonts, there was a humble little 6-part conversation that originally aired on PBS in 1988 and is still being rebroadcast today, called The Power of Myth. That was so profound, it remains one of the most popular series in the history of American public television. Thousands of letters of awe and praise have flooded into PBS from viewers since its first airing, saying things like, "For the first time in my life, I feel like I understand what it means to be human." It was as if someone had turned on the lights in a room I didn't know I was sitting in.
You gave words to things I've always felt, but never knew how to say.
Moyers asked the questions I didn't know I needed answers to. Myth isn't a lie, it's a doorway, and now I've stepped through it. And one viewer reportedly quit her job as an accountant after episode 3, saying, "Campbell said the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." And I thought, well, I'm not an accountant. I'm a potter now, sort of. I've made one bowl. It's uneven, but it's me. So who is this Joseph Campbell, you ask? Joseph Campbell was a world-renowned author and mythologist who went about the business of enlightening the modern world with all the delicious nuggets he learned from his lifelong study of the power of myths, stories, and mythology. He wrote some of the most influential books in modern mythological studies, including The Hero with 1,000 Faces, which George Lucas is to have said, if it weren't for that book, I'd still be trying to write Star Wars, and called Campbell my Yoda. So yeah, he's that cool. Moyers shared in The Power of Myth. When Joseph Campbell was a little boy, his father took him to the Museum of Natural History in New York, and he was transfixed by the totem poles and masks. Who made them, he wondered. What did they mean? He began to read everything he could about myths and legends. By 10, he was into the pursuit that made him one of the world's leading scholars of mythology and one of the most exciting teachers of our time. It was said he could make the bones of folklore and anthropology live. Moyers said that the driving idea of Campbell's life was to understand the power of the stories and legends of the human race, especially those common themes and deep principles which energized our imagination down through the ages. The jealous God of Abraham is not the God of the stories of India, who shows neither wrath nor mercy. But however the mystic traditions differ, Campbell said they're in accord in this respect. They call men and women to a deeper awareness of the very act of living itself, and they guide us through trials and traumas from birth to death. Campbell once said to his students at Sarah Lawrence College, "If you really want to help this world, what you will have to teach is how to live in it." Best known for popularizing the timeline of the hero's journey, Campbell cracked the code on humanity's shared narrative, showed us that whether you're a Greek demigod, a Buddhist monk, or just trying to survive another Monday, you, my glorious lover, are part of something epic. Campbell taught literature at Sarah Lawrence College for 38 years, guiding students through the Odyssey, the Bhagavad Gita, and Native American myths. and then weaving them all together with psychoanalysis, symbolism, and a touch of the mystical. His classes were famously wide-ranging and mind-expanding. Students described them as both intellectually rigorous and deeply transformative, the kind of courses that made you rethink life and possibly your major.
Father, I've decided to change my major to philosophy.
Oh no, now you'll be broke for the rest of your life.
Yes, but I'll be motherfucking happy.
At the heart of Campbell's philosophy is the belief that myths are not outdated relics of ancient cultures, but rather vital metaphors that illuminate the human experience. Campbell believed that mythology isn't just important, it's essential. Not in an ancient stories are kind of cool kind of way, even though they are totes cool. I mean, have you read the Odyssey? Amazeballs. But in the feast for your soul kind of way. For Campbell, myths aren't cultural artifacts. They are spiritual scaffolding binding us together. Without them, we're just a bunch of chaotic, confused animals swiping left and wondering why our lives feel hollow. JK, we know why. LOL. He said myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life. Meaning, before GPS, myths were roadmaps for our souls. They helped us understand who the hell we are, what we're doing here, how to navigate all the things like death, grief, love, joy, and existential spirals without totally losing our shit. Campbell saw mythology as a living, breathing part of culture, and he was deeply concerned that modern society had basically ghosted it, which it kind of has. He said the loss of the mythological consciousness is a disaster. Dramatic? Yes. Necessary? Probably. Without shared myths, we lose the plot and find ourselves pursuing things like corporate promotions and giant booties. And what's wild is that we didn't lose mythology because it stopped being relevant. We lost it because we stopped learning how to understand it. Maybe because, as Campbell reiterated, myths don't refer to literal facts. They're symbols of spiritual and psychological truths. But somewhere along the line, we started sifting through the metaphors in the myths and throwing out anything that didn't line up with scientific method or a nicely packaged religious doctrine, which to Campbell was tragic because we threw out the meaning with the mystery. And that mystery, it's the source of our being, hardwired in us and as us, and is basically our mainframe. As he said, we need myths that will identify the individual not with his local group, but with the planet. In other words, we need stories that remind us that we're not just Americans or accountants or gluten-intolerant people from Boca. We are humans in a shared, messy, sacred experience called life. Campbell believed that a functioning mythology gives people a sense of place in the universe, a personal connection to something greater than themselves. When we lose that, we replace it with shallow distractions like reality shows and online shopping. Keeping mythology alive doesn't just mean dressing up like a Greek god for Halloween, although that is really adorable. Or getting a Celtic rune tattoo, unless that's your thing, in which case, go ancient druids, y'all. It means understanding myth as a mirror, a tool, a guide. Campbell wasn't asking us to worship the gods. He was asking us to see ourselves in them, to recognize the archetypes at play in our breakdowns, our breakthroughs, our relationships, and our weird recurring dreams about being chased by shadowy exes through a car wash. The power of myth introduced millions of viewers to the idea that their lives might actually mean something, besides car payments and awkward small talk. Moyers begins the series by saying, Joseph Campbell was one of the most spiritual men I ever met, but he didn't have an ideology or a theology. Mythology to him was the song of the universe, music so deeply embedded in our collective unconscious that we dance to it even when we can't name the tune. The conversations for the power of myth were filmed shortly before Campbell's death in 1987 at George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch, and Moyers said, When Campbell died in 1987 at the age of 83, he was considered one of the world's foremost authorities on mythology. The stories and legends told by human beings throughout the ages to explain the universe and their place in it. The books he wrote or edited have influenced artists and performers, as well as scholars and students. So, the power of myth, aka the time PBS blew my fucking mind completely opened and my brains spilled out onto the couch, and as I watched the entire series, I was able to put all my brains back in my head, but better this time. I have easily watched this entire series over 100 times. I know, but I did go through a stage where I was putting it on to go to sleep, okay? I can't even tell you how much I love this man, whom I've never met, but I did internally adopt him as my energetic grandfather. So that's nice. Now, if you're thinking, cool, myths and meaning and metaphors, but isn't this just two dudes talking in tweed jackets for 6 hours? Why, yes it is. And it's absolutely fucking riveting. It's like My Dinner with Andre, but it blows your mind and changes your life. And yeah, they weren't having dinner. But, if My Dinner with Andre did that for you, I'm not here to judge. Enjoy and be well. So, think of the power of myth like a slow-burning enlightenment casserole. Each episode is a rich, metaphor-laden feast that gently smacks you in the soul and makes you go, wait, am I the hero? Is my existential dread sacred? Let's put it this way. I laughed, I cried. It was better than Cats the musical, but I did pause the video several times to look shit up. And as I listened to each conversation, I became very aware that I had been thinking too small about myself and too small and scared about life because I hadn't yet heard about the myths that could help me gain a wider perspective of life and help a girl who usually feels like a bit of an oddball feel like I belonged. Until I watched this series, whenever stuff was happening in my life, because of the way I saw the world, I felt terrified of everything and worked very hard to control everything around me, including the people. So if you were around me at that time, super sorry for any of the neurotic shit I did or said. Because although I had already been on the spiritual path at that point, which is obviously why I tuned in when I saw the show title, I still hadn't been able to absorb the spiritual teachings and stories I was hearing in a way that made those teachings and stories feel like they were talking to me and explaining life to me personally, like this series did for me. At the same time, no blame, because I understand now that my daily chaos wasn't random. It was all part of my journey, and therefore mythic. I wasn't just stressed, broke, and overwhelmed. I was on a motherfucking hero's journey. So that's cool. So I'm going to do a series about the Power of Myth series and talk about some of the stuff that changed my motherfucking life. But girl, you needed some backstory because this shit is deep. Campbell said that myths and dreams come from the same place. They come from realizations that have to find expression in symbolic form. And the myth, the only myth that's going to be worth thinking about in the future, is one that's talking about the planet. Not this city or these people, but the planet and everybody on it. And it will have to deal with what all myths have to deal with: the maturation of the individual, the gradual way to go from dependency through adulthood to maturity, all the way to the exit. And also how to relate to society and to the world of nature and the cosmos. That's what the myths have all talked about. That's what the myths of the future have to talk about. But the society that it's going to talk about is the society of the planet. And until that gets going, you don't have anything, he said. Moyers summed up perfectly by saying, the interesting thing is that far from undermining my faith, your work in mythology has liberated my faith from the cultural prisons to which it had been sentenced. To which Campbell replied, it liberated my own, and I know it's going to do it with everybody who really gets the message. Every mythology, every religion is true in this sense. It's true as metaphorical of the human and cosmic mystery. But when it gets stuck to the metaphor, then you're in trouble. You see, the thing up here, he said, this consciousness thinks it's running the shop, but it's a secondary organ of a total human being, and it must not put itself in control. It must submit and serve the humanity of the body. Because the hero's journey isn't just something that happens in myths or movies. It's happening to each of us right now, right this fucking second. And it starts with something Campbell called the call to adventure, meaning the launching pad to your journey. The call to adventure requires us to surrender control of what we think we know, what we think should happen, and allow the journey to take hold of us so we can follow the hero path and discover who we are and our destiny. I am soups excited to talk about this amazing teacher, this incredible series that Bill Moyers and public television gave us that changed my life forever and helped me see that I wasn't lost. I was on a journey. Campbell says, people say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive. Stay tuned for more delicioso Joseph Campbell and the power of myth deliciousness. Until then, this is the Spiritual Shit Show podcast. My name is Suzanne Sole. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Roll it, because you know we're going to talk about some really cool shit.